soil security. But now like many things, it takes a while to get the ideas developed and to make them start to move. But I think we're starting to move the idea. So what I'm going to talk about is admittedly a soil-centric framework, which because I think for us to secure soil into the future, we have to take a soil-centric view and not simply a view that sees soil that does something for someone else, and you do that in 100 different places. I think we do need to have a soil-centric view for at least for every country. And so what I'm talking about today is if you were a country, and I'm not talking about any country in particular, just any country that you might come from, how would you go about setting up a soil security strategy for that country? And to do that, you will need to think about some policies and some actions, and therefore that's really what I'm talking about today. And as I say here, this is very much a work in progress. It's work that we're doing here at the university, but it's also work we're doing in the think tank, and we'll be producing a discussion paper on this work in the near future. But what I present now is the work in progress, and I'm happy for you to see it. As Julio said, we've got these 5 dimensions for soil security. 2 of them, capacity and condition, are about the biophysical aspects, and condition really is what most people call soil health. But we call it condition because we recognize to understand soil condition or health, you need to know what the capacity of the soil is. In other words, not all soils are the same, and we don't expect all soils to be able to produce the same or act in the same way. Even if they are low producing soils, that does not mean they are in poor condition or unhealthy. They may be in perfect condition. It may just be their role in the ecosystem is that. Capital is about the economics, and connectivity is about the connection between soil and humanity. Now, codification today is really about governance, policy frameworks, law, etc. And of course, it could be in the public sector or it could be in the private sector. We wouldn't distinguish between those two. But for any country to have a soil security framework, we would expect them to deal with all of these dimensions simultaneously. So while codification is what we're talking about, it is also one of the dimensions. So we would not consider a soil to be secure if we couldn't estimate its capacity and condition, or what its capital, either production capital or its natural capital value might be. We wouldn't consider it secure if it wasn't connected to humanity or humanity wasn't connected to it. And we certainly wouldn't consider it secure if it didn't have any policy or regulation or law governing it. So that's why we need to look at all of these. But what I'm talking about today falls in the last category, really. But we would attempt in any strategy to have a multi-dimensional integration. Just trying to find my mouse. Where did it go? Okay. So obviously, I won't say too much about it. We all obviously have current challenges. We have key threats to soil all over the world, whether it be erosion or loss of organic carbon, or whether it's sealing in some places, or just climate change changing how soils behave in the environment. And roughly speaking, the annual cost of soil degradation or loss of condition is around 2 to 3% of GDP across the world. So that's a huge figure. And we can consider that probably about 20% of the world is in a severely degraded condition, and another 30% moderately degraded, and so on. So there's a huge problem out there with degradation of soil condition, which is how we would put it in the soil security framework. Now, let's say we want to secure our soil into the future. We are a country, we want to secure it. So what would we think about? Well, I've written it in the terms of I've got a target. So here I'm suggesting we've got a 20-year target to achieve soil security, because I think it's something that will take one to 2 decades to figure out, implement, and put in place and measure. So we want to sustainably manage our soil resources to support ecosystems, communities, and the economy. So we want to achieve functioning and resilient soil ecosystems. We want to optimize ecosystem soil service delivery, some of which are what people would call ecosystem services. Some are more than that. We want to eliminate net soil degradation. In other words, we certainly want to keep the net condition in the same state as at least. We want to integrate soil security into all policies that might be relevant, and we want to build a comprehensive soil security capacity. That's largely to do with human, institutional, and technical capacity. So we would need to do all of those things together. That would be our strategic objectives. And we might have targets. And all of this is notional, might differ from country to country, but it gives a flavor of what you might want to do. So for 20 years, we might want a 75% improvement in soil condition or health indicators, 60% increase in ecosystem service provision, and sustainable institutional arrangements for doing all of that. So that's just the kind of thing that you might want to do. So when you start off to do this, you've got your goals. Now you say, well, what principles do I need to achieve soil security? And we've done a load of work on that. And at the bottom of the slide there, you'll see a paper that goes into this in some detail. But I'll just summarize it very quickly here. The first thing, the most important thing, is to recognize that soils are diverse. There's a huge diversity of soil, and they're not all the same, and we need to recognize and treat that diversity. And that's why policy in one country might look different from policy in another country because of the diversity of soil. But that's still a principle that we need to recognize the diversity of our soils in each country. And where we have special endemic soils, we certainly want to protect them or secure them for humanity and for the nation. We want some kind of multifunctional soil management. It's not just about biomass production. It's about all the different functions and services that soil provides. And we need to come up with a strategy that deals with all of those. We need to take a precautionary approach and minimize risk. We do need stakeholder engagement and participatory governance, and we do need adaptive management and continuous learning. Now, if you read the paper by Sharififa, you'll see a lot more on policy, but these are just some ideas that should underlie whatever strategy we have. So we've got some policy principles, and then they drive policies. So these are principles. So what I'm going to suggest as a first cut at how you might do this for a country is 5 broad national policies. Now, you might have 4, you might have 7, but I'm going to give you 5, and they cover the 9 principles of soil policy and 5 dimensions of soil security and the 3 roles of functions, services, and threats which soil play. So first of all, you would want some sort of integrated monitoring network. You want to know in what state we've got this huge diversity of soil. We need to look at that, and then we need to monitor how that's changing. So you do need a monitoring network. The thing that we bring in soil security is the idea of reference states and reference soils, genosoils and phenosoils, and that's something that doesn't exist in these soil health frameworks, and I think that brings a lot of advantage. And we would want to bring a monitor, evaluate, adapt, learn cycle to report progress and recalibrate the policy. But you need some sort of monitoring network to monitor how things are changing, and there are different ways to do that, but we're not going to go into the detail of that. You probably want to base something around a land use planning framework. In other words, and it's more around a soil capacity and condition planning framework, because we want to protect high value irreplaceable soils. We want to require soil assessments for major projects and align spatial planning with soil capability and risk. So I think we need to tie the condition and capacity of our soil and its capital value into a planning framework that says what you can do to various bits of soil. So that goes along with it. Along with that, we would like to see a soil services valuation and incentives. In other words, we want to value the services that soil provides, whether it's carbon sequestration, water regulation, biodiversity, productivity, and come up with some mechanisms, largely public sector, but perhaps private sector, perhaps finance-based mechanisms that deploy stewardship payments, that give payments for ecosystem or soil service schemes, and market instruments that drive those, align some taxes and levy layers together, and standardized measurement, reporting and verification, so land stewards are rewarded for verified outcomes. So that's a very important part of the whole thing. We would like to see a threat prevention framework to prevent the threats to soil, erosion, compaction, etc., and fund restoration of seriously degraded soil. While we can give incentives for improvement, we do need to probably, in seriously degraded areas, fund some kind of restoration programs, find the best practice management, and measure gains in soil condition. And then, of course, we need a governance framework for participatory action, because as we've heard from the foundation, it's really about the landholders and farmers and whoever is looking after the soil to work on this, because they're the ones that are closest to the soil. So you need some co-design with them. You need to bring in indigenous knowledge, etc., and civil society. You need to build national capacity, maintain some independent advice, and use some sort of transparent digital platforms to share the methods and so on. So we would see a national strategy having these 5 policies and having all the mechanisms to drive those policies. But they all go together. We wouldn't pick one over another. We would try to do them all together. And then obviously you would want to implement that. In this template or proposal, we're suggesting a 20-year time frame. It may be shorter, but it will have to go through a number of phases and have to work at the level from the stakeholder partnerships, public-private collaborations, to local, regional and national level. The first phase is just establishing the institutions and the monitoring systems, the legal frameworks, and initial programs. Might take 5 years. Then you need to expand it up to scale it up, expand the conservation and restoration efforts. The third phase might be integrating soil security into all policy areas and optimizing program performance. And then at the end, we want some sustainability and maintenance, ensuring the long-term sustainability of our achievements over the previous years. The time frame is notional, but I just put that down so that we could have an idea. And obviously, we want to integrate what we're doing with national, regional, and regional, I mean, international and global frameworks. And we would want to integrate policies, and this is something that we think about a lot in Australia, between agricultural policy and environmental policy. We would want to integrate those also with climate policy and urban policy. We would like to see regional or local, international and bilateral cooperation, transboundary ideas, regional knowledge, technology transfer. And then, of course, we would want to see an international alignment framework through the Sustainable Development Goals, climate change, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and UNCCD. And we would be looking at a number of the Sustainable Development Goals that. But what I would say now is we actually need an international agreement on soil security itself. I think that would be the best approach. And that's the reason why we set up the think tank, to actually try and achieve in a 5 or maybe 10-year period some sort of international agreement around soil security. And just to finish up, we need a call to action to achieve this. And I think the best way to do that is to explain the benefits of doing all of this in the implementation phases. There will be environmental benefits, there will be economic benefits, and there will be social benefits. And there will be a multi-level governance architecture driving all of this. So I will say the time for action is now, and together we can secure our soil resources for current and future generations. And with that, I think I'll finish. And I'll try and escape out of this and stop sharing.